I found him. He was armed only with the 6K Pro.
Welcome, young Savage Walker. I have been expecting you. You no longer need those. Guard, leave us. I'm looking forward to completing your training. In time, you will call me Director.
You're gravely mistaken. You won't convert me as you did my head of department.
Oh no, my young filmmaker. It is you who are mistaken about a great many shoots. By now you must know your former cinematographer can never be turned from the corporate side. Your camera is no match for the power of the Canon Cine line.
It is useless to resist.
Your overconfidence is your weakness.
Your faith in Blackmagic design is yours.
You don't know the power of the corporate side.
Your insignificant Pocket 6K Pro user base will be crushed.
Join the Canon Empire.
I'm afraid the new Canon website will be quite operational when your friends shop online. You want this, don't you? The camera envy is swelling in you now. Take your filmmaking equipment. Use it. Give in to your anger. Hit record and your journey to the corporate side would be complete. It is unavoidable. It is your destiny.
YouTube has taught you well.
Good. Your camera has made you powerful. Now fulfill your destiny and take your cinematographer's place at my side. Do it.
Never. I'll never turn to the corporate side. You failed, Your Highness. I am an indie filmmaker, like my cinematographer before me.
So be it, filmmaker. Your filmmaking skills are no match for the power of the corporate side. And now, young Savage Walker, you will die.
No.
Sorry, Lord Photographer, did you say something?
No.
Never interrupt me when I'm cooking.
Nailed it.
Alright, so perhaps that intro was a little dramatic. Firstly, I'm still a corporate shooter. There's nothing wrong with making money, and corporate jobs can provide a great way to help you fund your more artistic endeavors. So today, I do want to talk about the differences between the new Pocket 6K Pro and my old Canon C200. the pros and cons of each, and why you might choose one over the other, and ultimately, whether or not I need to keep both. I was a Canon fanboy long before I was a Blackmagic fanboy. I shot my latest feature film on the Canon 5D Mark III, and my award-winning short film was filmed on the Canon 1DC. I recently filmed a documentary on the Canon C200 Mark I. And all of this was before graduating to the Canon C200. Now, since seeing the camera released on the market in 2015-16, I've salivated over the prospect of it. There is a lot to like about this camera. Touchscreen monitor, films in 4K and compressed 8-bit codecs, and uncompressed 12-bit Canon Raw lite. It has, of course, the famous Canon color science, good autofocus, XLR ports with excellent preamps, SDI connection, and a very functional form factor that makes it easy to film both on a tripod or handheld run and gun. I've had this camera for about a year and found it to be excellent to work with. The term workhorse was invented for this camera. It really can do almost anything. If you're working in the corporate world, the 8-bit MP4 and XAVC options are perfect. You get a nice crisp picture and great out-of-the-box colors, but without the massive file sizes. And the autofocus is great for sit-down interviews. However, if you want to step it up for higher profile jobs, you can always shoot in Canon Raw lite, which is absolutely beautiful. If you get your settings dialed in right, every time I used Raw lite, I was blown away by the quality. The camera is robust, and I think sometimes an undersold feature of most of Canon's Cine line is the excellent preamps. You can trust the audio to be really nice, whether using a shotgun mic or lapel mics, and as a solo shooter this makes life a lot easier than having to resort to using a sound recorder externally. Finally, the internal NDs just give you so much more flexibility in terms of controlling your image quickly and efficiently. Using the C200 led me to selling my original Pocket 4K in favour of the more functional, more reliable Canon camera, and I was planning on this being my main camera for maybe some years to come. That was until the release of the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro, which, with the addition of the ND filters, extra mini XLR port, and incredibly affordable price point, it was just too good to resist. What I thought originally is that I would continue to use both cameras, the 6K Pro for my film work and the C200 for my corporate work. But what I've found is that the 6K Pro now performs very adequately in both worlds, and I'm picking up my C200 a lot less. So why is this? Well, looking at the cameras side by side, they both have their advantages. And while yes, the C200's form factor is better, I would always have to add an external monitor to accurately judge my images, whereas the 6K Pro's new souped up extra bright touchscreen monitor was good enough to use on its own, and compared to the C200's own monitor, well, it was light years ahead of it. The additional buttons on the C200 are very useful, but the actual menu interface seems clunky in comparison to the 6K Pro's elegant, simple and quick ability to adjust settings. And then we come down to picture quality, and suddenly the choice becomes a lot less simple. For years the internet has been screaming about Canon's cripple hammer, the concept being that Canons hamstring their own cameras by putting unnecessary limitations on them to protect their older cameras or the cameras higher up in the cinema line. This cripple hammer can come in many forms. On the EOS R you could shoot in 4K finally, but only with a 1.8 times crop factor. On the new Canon C200 you can shoot uncropped 10-bit in 4K, but you can't shoot in Canon Raw lite. On the EOS R5, there's a time limit on how long you can film in 4K before the camera shuts down, originally claimed by Canon to protect the camera from overheating, when possibly the camera wasn't overheating at all. Sneaky sneaky sir. So what's the C200's cripple hammer problem? Well, it's that damn compressed 4K 8-bit codec. What's the big deal about 8-bit? Well, it's not that 8-bit is bad, it just means it has a lot less color information than say 10 or 12-bit images, and therefore a lot less latitude when adjusting those colors. This may only become noticeable when putting two images side by side, but once you see what a 10-bit codec can do, it's hard to go back. With the C200, you can either shoot with the 8-bit MP4 XAVC versions, or you can shoot uncompressed 12-bit RAW. There is no in-between, which means you have something that is quite low quality, which is often not quite good enough, and then you have something that's too high quality, which is very hard to manage in post-production and often total overkill for client work. There's nothing wrong with filming in 8-bit, but it's just so much worse than the Raw codec. And it's also not as good as a lot of other cameras currently in the market, which all provide 10-bit codec options, including, you guessed it, the Pocket 6K Pro. The 6K Pro offers B-RAW, which firstly is 1,000 times easier to edit than Canon Raw Lite. Raw Lite is a son of a bitch in both DaVinci Resolve and Adobe, and it will quickly bog down the timeline of even pretty powerful computers. There's nothing light about Canon Raw Lite. They maybe should have called it Canon Raw Break Your Computer, it's so fucking heavy, but I guess it doesn't quite have the same ring to it. It certainly runs better in Resolve, but it's often far from a smooth experience. This means if you want to use Raw Lite, you'll have to either downscale it when you import it, or create proxies for it, both of which are time consuming. The sheer size of Canon Raw Lite makes it impractical to shoot large projects on. This footage was highlights from a wrestling event which chewed up 1 terabyte of space on my computer for what is essentially less than half a day of filming. That's just not feasible for many people at the lower end. And if you're handing over raw footage for a client, you can bet they probably don't want terabytes of video that breaks their computers. Blackmagic's B-RAW, on the other hand, can provide something almost similar in quality at a fraction of the file size. Not only that, it's much easier to edit in either Resolve or Premiere and often doesn't require transcoding. So you save a lot of time in post using B-RAW over Canon Raw Lite. There's no doubt that Canon Raw Lite provides some stunning images, maybe better in my opinion than its B-RAW counterpart, but not better enough for it to be worth the post-production headaches that come with it. So when I'm thinking about shooting something in RAW, I immediately turn again to my 6K Pro instead of the C200. Don't get me wrong, there is something magical about Canon's Raw Lite. I was reminded of this filming a recent YouTube piece. The colors pop, they're incredibly rich, it's sharp and crisp, and it requires very little manipulation in post. But this 2-minute skit also took up 400 gigs of space before converting it to ProRes. So it's great for an uncompromising image quality, but it's a very expensive data proposition. We also haven't talked about the 6K Pro's non-B-RAW filming options, which also happen to be much better than the Canon C200s. The 6K Pro shoots uncropped 4K in Apple ProRes, which is great for a number of reasons. First off, ProRes is an absolute dream for any editing software. No transcoding, no jerky timelines, buttery smooth, easy to cut footage straight out of the camera. Apple ProRes is also a 10-bit color space, unlike Canon's 8-bit lower quality shooting options. While the 8-bit Canon codecs are not too taxing for most computers, they definitely don't cut as well as the 6K ProRes does. Not only that, but ProRes is a widely accepted high-quality finishing codec, meaning you can output to the format you're both shooting and editing in, which saves you even more time on the final render. For quick turnaround content, you can record directly onto an SSD drive and then edit on that same SSD drive. You don't even need to bring the footage onto your computer, which again can save even more time. The C200 doesn't really offer external recording options that could accommodate this type of workflow. So looking at this simply, when using the 6K Pro, I'm going to get a superior image when I film at a lower quality, and that image is easier and quicker for my computer to edit. If I film higher quality in B-RAW, I'm going to get an almost comparable image to Canon Raw Lite, but it will take up less than half the storage space, and will also be easier and quicker for my computer to edit. Another advantage of the 6K Pro is its low light capability. While it's far from a low light beast, one of the first things I noticed about the C200 is that it's not particularly good in low light. This shocked me because both the C300 Mark I and the Canon 5D Mark III were absolutely excellent in low light conditions, and I expected the same from the C200. But it struggles, and shooting in raw light, your image will fall to pieces even quicker. Whereas the 6K Pro filming in B-RAW at ISO 1250, once downscaled to 4K with a little bit of denoise, holds up much better in my opinion. This plays a big part in the overall quality of images when filming with natural light or minimal lights, which as an indie filmmaker, you will find you do a lot of. And then we come to color science. Canon's color science is famous, and for years every other brand has been trying to play catch up. Well, apart from maybe Ari. They have set the standard in this area, and it is no doubt fantastic. But Blackmagic have clearly invested a lot of their time in developing their own color science, and you can tell they want to be seen as leaders in this department in much the same way that Canon is. That means they are constantly releasing firmware updates as they revise and tweak their system. With each color science generation, we get improvements to most of Blackmagic's camera lineup. For Blackmagic users, it's a great way to subtly upgrade your camera for free. So which color science is better, Canon or Blackmagic? Well, that is really a matter of opinion. My take on it is that Canon's colors are more accurate to real life, while Blackmagic's are more, for a lack of a better word, stylish. They're going for a look, which while not true to life exactly, does feel incredibly filmic, or dare I say, cinematic.
Who keeps saying that?
It was him. Let's get him, fellas.
Now, again, this is personal preference, but I am an indie filmmaker, so I'm not really interested in real life. Real life is boring. Give me that stylized version of the world. I find that to be much more visually interesting. So for me, I do prefer the colors coming out of the Pocket 6K Pro, especially with the new Gen 5 color science. It has a vibrance and pop to it that just makes your shots look more interesting. The C200, using those 8-bit settings, can definitely feel a little flat and lifeless, and it sometimes has that very digital look. So we've talked about the image, we've talked about post-production workflow, and all of these things I think favour the 6K Pro in many situations. But there's no doubt the C200's form factor and audio preamps are better, and in terms of sheer speed to set up a shot, you can get the Canon ready to go much quicker. You also get great autofocus, which gives you more freedom in terms of the way you film. Then there's the reliability factor. There was no blue screen tint on my C200. No camera randomly turning itself off, no dead pixels. Essentially, there was no weird Blackmagic quality control shit to deal with. And it's hard to put a price on reliability. That said, I have used the Pocket 6K Pro to film for long hours over long days, and despite the reported problems people have talked about, it's been completely reliable for me so far. At one point, a 4K 8-bit codec was acceptable in a cinema camera, but time moves ever quicker in this space, with a new camera coming out almost every month. Had Canon at some point chosen to nut up and provide a 10-bit codec option via firmware for the C200, it would still be an incredibly compelling choice, even in 2021, especially if it was a little more competitively priced. As it is, unless you're planning to really use its RAW capabilities and have the computer and hard drive space to accommodate RAW, there's some better camera options out there. And the 6K Pro, for me, ticks a lot more boxes. I still think the C200 is a great camera, but it just doesn't speak to my soul the way the 6K Pro does.
Your soul is mine.
If you can deal with the slightly more awkward form factor, slightly worse quality preamps, and the loss of autofocus, the 6K Pro offers a lot more bang for your buck, and a superior image under most conditions. It'll take a little bit more time to set up and master your image, but when you do, the results are excellent. It's given me the confidence to let go of my C200 and trust the 6K Pro for all of my shoots going forward. In fact, this piece to camera is one of the first I've filmed on the Pocket 6K Pro. Remember, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K Pocket Pro or whatever the it's called will be with you, always. OB1 per Pocket 6K Pro B? Also remember, like and subscribe, always. Also, use the Force or something. I feel like that was important. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing, or maybe check out my latest films for free on Tubi TV and Amazon Prime in the links below. My name is Guy Pigden, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll catch you on the next one.